Hi everyone, welcome back to the economics track. Perfect, I already have my next guest here. She is Sonia. I'm going to share a quick view of her presentation. I hope you all can see it. Sonia is a technology analyst at ID TechX, and she's going to talk about M&A in AM 2022. Analyzing mergers, acquisitions, and investment activity in the additive manufacturing industry in 2022.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just take a moment to present my screen.
Yes, and I will remove my screen if I can figure out how. Perfect. All right, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Just a moment for me to get my slides up. And can you see? Okay, yes, it looks good. So, right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this presentation. Thank you for TIPE for having me. My name is Sonia Didania. I'm a 3D printing analyst at iTechX, and we'll be talking a little bit about M&A in AM 2022, a little catchy little phrase for the mergers, acquisitions, and other investment activity happening in additive manufacturing last year. So quick intro into who am I? So as I've mentioned before, I'm an analyst at IDTechX. I originally studied material science and engineering at University of Pennsylvania in the US, and then the same subject at Imperial College London in the UK. I'm still in London working for IDTechX. We are a technical market intelligence company that provides market research on all sorts of emerging technologies. A couple of them are like advanced materials, AI and software, sensors and haptics, and I am our 3D printing lead. So what that means is that I look at all aspects of the industry, both technical and economics, and looks at all sorts of materials in the industry as well. So whether it comes to ceramic or composite 3D printing, or the mainstays like polymer AM and metal AM, I look at it all. It's such a fascinating industry to be a part of, and I'm lucky to be able to study it in such depth. Couple of FYIs I would just like to let you know before we start is that we are hiring at IDTechX in our analyst positions and our other business development and HR positions as well. So check that out if you're more interested on our website. And then additionally, I happen to be the London ambassador for Women in 3D Printing, and we're starting up that chapter. So if you are interested in hearing more about that, please connect with me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn anyways if you have further questions. If you have any interest in seeing the slides from today, you can also email me directly, s.didania@idtechx.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the additive manufacturing ecosystem is a pretty broad one that I feel like awareness of the extent of it is becoming more common now for end users. It's not just the printer anymore. It's about the materials, the software, post-processing, quality assurance, and other things as well that enables 3D printing to be utilized in high-value industries and applications. And so the maturation of all aspects of AM is helping to drive its adoption by end users. And so this maturation of the whole ecosystem is affecting the way new 3D printing companies are approaching the industry, and as well as influencing how financial activity takes place in the industry. So what acquisitions are being made, what collaborations are being formed, how much money is going into what companies, so on and so forth. So I wanted to sort of lay that out there before we get into the main topic, which is really that investment in M&A activity. So last year, IDTechX was tracking extensively how much investment and M&A activity was taking place. So by our count, we counted at least 30 acquisitions or mergers in 2022. 4 companies that went public, either by SPACs or IPOs. And then lastly, an estimated $1.3 billion in public investment, rather publicly disclosed investment, going into 3D printing related companies. This is a lot of money going to 3D printing, as well as a lot of mergers, acquisitions, aka consolidation occurring. If you were to compare it to last year's similar statistics, we counted around 40 acquisitions or mergers in 2021, around 13 companies that went public, and around $950 million in investment in 2021. What's really notable to me is the continued jump in investment, about $350 million from 2021 to 2022. So what that reflects is a continuous growth in funding flowing into additive manufacturing from 2020 to 2021, and also from 2021 to 2022. There's still pretty high interest in the field from investment vehicles, which we'll get into a bit further later. But first, let's start on the public offering side, because you'll notice a pretty stark decrease in companies going public in 3D printing. So when we look at 2021, that was a really hot year for SPAC IPOs and the more traditional IPOs. 13 total 3D printing related companies listed on stock exchanges globally in 2021. Compare that with 2022, where only 4 AM related companies went public. Another note here that Nubaru is more tangentially related to AM as a supplier of industrial blue lasers. So only 3 companies really directly in AM went public. These are Cygnus, a Polish group of several AM companies under their umbrella, Hyperion X, a supplier of sustainable titanium materials, and BioLife 4D, a bioprinting company. So that begs a question. Why has there been such a drop in public offerings from 2021 to 2022? One consideration is perhaps the performance of previous 3D printing related public offerings in 2021, which, if those are not maybe hitting expectations for growth, that might be impacting whether other companies want to go public, / if other companies want to invest to help some of these 3D printing companies go public. Another potential explanation is going back to the overall market conditions for public offerings, which are potentially unfavorable right now. In fact, we can look to Essentium, a 3D printer manufacturer who announced their SPAC IPO in 2021, were set to go public in 2022, and then specifically cited market conditions for the eventual cancellation of their SPAC acquisition and public offering. Those market conditions are affecting public offerings in all industries. SPAC IPOs are down actually 80% plus in 2022 compared to 2021 across all industries. So with that said, it's possible that we've witnessed the peak of SPAC IPOs in 2021, and with potentially difficult market conditions approaching in 2023/2022 as well, investors are hitting the brakes on going public in such a climate. It will be interesting to see if anyone intends to ring the bell on a public stock exchange in 2023. But current market uncertainty, as we might say, is definitely not making it easy for that to happen at this current moment. Moving on from our SPAC IPOs into our mergers and acquisitions, there were a lot of acquisitions and mergers in 2022. We tracked around 30 plus occurring. I couldn't list all of them on the screen. We have about half of them. Mostly the most notable ones, either the most notable acquiring companies or just the most interesting companies to be acquired. And you'll notice most of the companies that are doing the acquisitions have a lot of stature and a lot of, let's say, favorable market position in this industry. So you see many market leaders from Stratasys, Markforged, Materialize, making moves in 2022 to further consolidate and really shore up their position in the AM industry through acquisitions. Some of the most notable acquisitions of this bunch is definitely Stratasys' acquisition of Covestro's AM business and Nikon's acquisitions of both SLM Solutions and Octasys, a metal service provider, which furthers their expansion into metal AM after their 2021 acquisition of metal AM service provider Morph 3D. A major move in the desktop printer segment was the merger of Ultimaker and MakerBot, as it combines two market leaders in a very fragmented and contested space. For most acquiring companies, their acquisitions sought to expand their AM technology portfolio. So for example, in the case of 3D Systems, Nano Dimension, and Markforged, they were bringing new AM technologies to their companies that they previously did not have. For example, in the case of 3D Systems, you had the pellet extrusion company Titan Robotics get acquired. In the case of Nano Dimension, you have ceramic/metal vat photopolymerization company Admatech get acquired. Same thing with Markforged, they acquired binder jetting company Digital Metal. The other case is that these acquiring companies were bringing other important aspects of AM, like software, in-house to facilitate the ease of adopting their printer technologies. This could be seen with Stratasys and Carbon with their acquisitions of Ribbon and Parameters, respectively. And this goes back to the previous point I had made, which is that that AM requires a whole ecosystem for it to be successfully adopted and applied. So with these acquisitions, you can see sort of companies looking to develop their ecosystem beyond just straight up the printer technology. The materials, the software, and other aspects as well are being acquired to help build an internal company's ecosystem. So having said all of that, how did this M&A activity speak to the expansion of the AM industry? We had 40 plus mergers and acquisitions in 2021, another 30 plus in 2022. That really feels like the AM industry, highly fragmented in itself, is being consolidated perhaps. That we'll see slowly this high number of companies start to decrease as you have bigger companies eat up smaller ones to really shore up their positions. Having said that, there is still a lot of expansion at the bottom of this industry with small and medium-sized companies popping up left and right still. And that is in part thanks to the incredible amount of funding that is flowing into additive manufacturing still. So as I mentioned before, we have had $1.3 billion in publicly disclosed investment in 3D printing related companies 2022, up from $950 million in 2021. Note that both of those figures don't include any private investment that has not been publicly disclosed to ID TechX. When we look at the types of companies attracting such investment, the vast majority is going to those 3D printer manufacturers. Of those companies, it's primarily metal printer manufacturers like Vulcan Forms, who had raised over $250 million last year for their large format laser powder bed fusion machines, and concrete 3D printing companies like Icon. So I had mentioned before that there is a whole ecosystem going into the application of 3D printing. And so a lot of money going into other aspects than just the printer. However, still there are some printer manufacturers getting a lot of interest in investment. And I think most of that is found in those metal and concrete 3D printing fields, because they are seen as technology fields capable of targeting high value verticals like aerospace, automotive, construction. And so investors can look at that and see that these companies might be able to generate a return on their massive investments into the field. Another popular space overall for investment is software. Improved AM software is critical to easing adoption of AM, not to mention just the general popularity of technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning with investors. Two interesting things to mention along that software side is first, the amount of companies who are gathering that investment that are trying to utilize these popular technologies like AI and machine learning to really enhance their software. Think generative design software that are using AI to make completely different lattice structures. And along those lines, the fact that these software companies are engaging in a lot of collaboration across the board to help make sure their software improvements are making it actually to end users. The other interesting thing to mention on the software realm is that the incorporation of AI into things like quality assurance and post monitoring of printing. So monitoring the print, or rather predicting defects in the print prior to any printing happening, and then trying to compensate for that. Alternatively, seeing things get printed either in real time or after it prints, and then adjusting the CAD file to make up for defects that have been occurring or are occurring within the print. So a lot of interesting uses, I think, in the software realm of these very popular technologies like AI that really attract investors' interest. Another couple of things to mention. First, the majority of investment that is shown here is going into American companies. I think that very much reflects the ease of raising high amounts of capital in the US compared to other regions. Second, while funding has increased year over year by over 300 million, the amount of funding rounds or companies receiving funding is nearly the same in 2021 and 2022. So I think the overarching takeaway from there is that the 1.3 billion in investment is showing that investors still believe that the AM industry will continue expanding to allow these companies that have received funding to grab a piece of that pie. Hence, them throwing more money into the field, even though it's not a higher number of companies still. Okay, so having said all of those, investment news, the exciting mergers, acquisitions, and so on and so forth, it really paints a rosy picture of AM's growth through 2022. But I think the reality is a bit more complicated when you look at the overall picture from like a financial or market point of view. First and foremost, this year has seen quite a few notable bankruptcies and exit from the 3D printing field. The most high-profile bankruptcy in 2022 was probably that of Fast Radius, an American service provider with a digital ordering platform. They had previously raised millions in investment and went public through a SPAC less than a year ago. But late last year, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, stating, quote, that recent headwinds in the capital markets have inhibited our ability to adequately put in place the capital structure needed. Another high-profile exit from 3D printing is that of Xerox, who is scaling back their LMX additive business to only support currently installed printers, despite recently announcing new customers and partnerships. Xerox has previously mentioned that they're really focused on fast growing, highly innovative businesses. And so it seems like Xerox is focusing on other fast-growing businesses within their portfolio instead of AM. I guess similar to that would be that Covestro, in their sale of their AM business to Stratasys, mentioned that they wanted to focus on their core businesses rather than innovative areas like AM, hence their sale to Stratasys. A few of your other bankruptcies in this field includes Rise, Digital Alloys, Satori, who are all 3D printer manufacturers. You have Clara.io, an online depository of files. Local Motors, who are using AM to make electric vehicles. And not 2022, but happened very early into 2023, was the bankruptcy of 3D Metal Forge. They were a public metal service provider in Singapore that has recently filed their bankruptcy papers. So when you look at all of that, it's clear that there's a lot of excitement, still a lot of hype, but still a lot of difficulties with really finding applications appropriate for the printer technologies that are coming onto the market. Alongside all of that are layoffs taking place in many prominent 3D printing companies. Desktop Metal announced the layoffs of 12% of their employees in 2022, citing the need to cut costs and consolidate their staff after many acquisitions. Other companies that received million in fundings, namely Carbon and Nexa 3D, have also faced layoffs. Additionally, HP has announced plans to cut up to 6,000 staff across their entire company, but it's unclear how much this might affect their 3D printing business. Finally, you just have other notable news. So we mentioned before, Essentium's canceled public offering. Shapeways not meeting the New York Stock Exchange's listing standards, and HP CEOs stating publicly that 3D printing, while growing, has not met their early expectations for rapid growth. So again, while all these excitement of billions and billions of dollars going into 3D printing has made it seem like this is an incredible, fast-growing field. There's so much room for people to come in and grab their piece of the pie. It's clear that it's still not without its struggles for companies to find the right audience, to find the right applications, to make their technology worthwhile overall. And so I hope that with, giving some information about the financial difficulties that some companies have faced, that it makes it clear 3D printing, while on the upswing, still faces an uphill battle in terms of making sure that all of these companies can actually survive in this highly, highly competitive market. So having mentioned all of these things, where does this leave the 3D printing industry in 2023? And now let me provide my overall outlook for the industry coming out of 2022. So having gone to a lot of the exciting trade events like Rapid and Forum Next, having spoken with a lot of 3D printing companies and end users alike, I think I've come to the conclusion that there is that growing consciousness of the reality of additive manufacturing. Back 5-10 years ago, there was that huge excitement or rather maybe hype bubble of 3D printing being able to do anything and everything. And I think everyone's more aware now that no, it can't do that, especially from an end user's point of view. It's not simple to adopt by any metric, and it cannot address all applications. You have the costs of adoption, as well as the knowledge needed to successfully implement it, plus the knowledge needed to find the right application for it. So with that in mind, companies are focusing more on developing their AM ecosystem and the appropriate application to really ease that barrier to adoption for potential end users. And so while AM might not have met the initial hype, there still is a lot of growth to be had in the field and a lot of hope for companies to grow into and take a big slice of this pie, hence all of that investment. So IDTechX is predicting that 3D printing industry will grow to hit 41 billion in hardware and material sales alone. That doesn't include all the potential revenue to be had from software sales and other services that might be provided to potential end users. This is just a quick summary of what all I've been discussing, some of the market activity highlights. If you have any further questions for me, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or at my email, s.dadania@idtechx.com. All the information I was talking about today is available in our market research report, so you can check that out at our website. And I'm going to open the field to questions. Thank you for joining me.
Perfect, right on time.
Yeah.
Great timing. It was a very interesting presentation, and we have a couple of questions already. Everyone else, feel free to just write in the Q&A that is right next to the chat on your right-hand side, sorry. First question, how could a 3D printing startup approach investment with any hope of success given these market conditions?
I think it's really, really critical for 3D printing startups to assess whether or not their technology or whatever their offering is approaching a niche that actually has not been addressed by anyone else. Because that's part of the issues. You have a lot of companies who are all gambling for the same exact space. So first and foremost, you need to look and see whether or not your technology is genuinely doing something new. There's a lot of overlap between companies. And then secondly, I think, is looking sort of overall what value your technology may add to the value chain. So is this something that could maybe really open up new applications, or is it just an incremental maybe improvement on what's currently out there? Reason being, if it's just maybe an incremental improvement, maybe it's worth assessing, is getting a lot of funding for this the appropriate way to get this technology out to market? Maybe it's selling this technology to other companies so that make sure it gets out to end users. So I think in this competitive market, is everyone needing to raise a whole lot of money? It's a genuine question, and a genuine, thing that people need to assess in terms of how they want their technology to be in this market. There's a bunch
of
yes, I was looking at them. I'm not sure which one.
Let's go with the one most voted. So which AM business field seems to be the new sweet spot in the near future?
Well, if we're going to take it from an investment point of view, there's two that are really, really popular. One of them is automotive. The companies that are receiving a huge amount of money to get their technology out there are those that are exclusively focusing on automotive. So one example is Divergent Technologies. They haven't really pioneered their own printing technology, but rather a software value chain that they're hoping will enable the usage of 3D printing in automotive. Now, and I think a lot of that hopes is buoyed on the fact that electric vehicles is generally a very popular field for investment and interest as a whole. So I think the hope for investors is that if this company could get into this very popular, hyped up field that is expected to grow heavily in the future, so IDTechX forecasts for the electric vehicle market to surpass 1 trillion in 10, 15 years, then there's a lot of growth to be had on that, a lot of ROI. There's still plenty of issues facing the application of 3D printing in automotive, but I think that's the mindset going into those investments. The other field is construction. Construction obviously is a massive field, and that's why there's a lot of money going into 3D printing companies who can maybe penetrate. If they take just a portion of that massive field, then it's worth the investment. As with anything else, though, plenty of issues facing construction 3D printing. The fact is, up until now, there hasn't been very much practical application of it. A lot of demonstrator projects, but not a lot of actual businesses and homes being built with construction 3D printing. So for that value to happen, we need to actually see proper application of this field. And you're starting to see that with a few companies, like I think Diamond Age just had their first home go up for sale that was printed with concrete. So I think those are the general mindsets of investors who are putting money into these companies they're trying to get out there.
Yeah. I think we might have squeezed time. We are a little bit out of time. I don't know if we should answer any more